us your first name and where you're from?
Jimmy from Phoenix, Arizona.
Can you tell us about your sign?
Yeah, so this says Trump is the symptom, capitalism is the disease, socialism is the cure. The first side says full rights for all immigrants. That's a sign from the Party for Socialism and Liberation, and it gives it nice and simple that Donald Trump, he's not a result of not just racism and xenophobia in America, but also capitalism in general. This is where our country, our society gets to when we let capitalism go unfettered, and we get the most marginalized people in this country to be the scapegoats by the major electorate. So that is like the white voting base that came out and voted.
I remember John Kasich in 2016 during the Republican primary talking about before we get into the discussion of a pathway to citizenship, we should talk about a pathway to legal status. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, it depends on what he means by legal status.
It's sort of like a compromise between those who want no amnesty, no granting of citizenship, versus those who say we want to give them a pathway to citizenship.
Well, John Kasich, he, as a middle of the road, as I think most media outlets would like to paint him, he, at the end of the day, is an establishment Republican that does fall in line with the reformist immigration policies that want to give this middle of the road approach to immigration. I think we need to not do that. We need to take the most humanitarian approach to immigration right now. We are separating people at the border. We are not allowing people to come into this country to work like they want to be law-abiding citizens, and I mean that not by any legal definition, but by members of the community that operate and are integral parts of that community. So I think that that's not the approach that we need to take right now.
Just quickly going back to 2016, do you see the election of Donald Trump more as a result of racism or as economic distress?
I think there's equal parts racism, equal parts economic distress. This country was founded on racist principles, and it's been a deeply entrenched part of our society since this nation's founding. We can look at the civil rights movement or things like the abolition of slavery as major milestones, of course, but those at the end of the day are not enough because racism is entrenched in every single system that this country has set up over the years. And as far as economic anxiety, or what was that? Economic distress?
Economic distress.
That definitely is a major part. I think that's why candidates like Bernie Sanders are really popular with people that voted for Trump, because they kind of look at things more from an economic perspective. But when you run an entire campaign and a presidency based on scapegoating people like immigrants and refugees, then it kind of takes economic anxiety or economic distress and racism and merges them two together, and that's where we get fascism.
Can you tell me one policy or something that President Trump has done that you do not agree with and you do not support?
Most recently, the partition plan that was released for the annexation of the West Bank in Israel, of Palestine to Israel. That whole plan was clearly made without any regard for the Palestinian people or anybody that was living in Palestine. The plan was made with Benny Gantz, Netanyahu, and Donald Trump, two Israeli government officials, and then Donald Trump. And so that clear disrespect and lack of inclusion of all represented parties really shows the corruption that not only this foreign policy, the administration's foreign policy is having, but also just like the issue in general of Zionism not giving a voice to Palestinians.
Is there a policy or something Trump has done that you do agree with, that you do support?
As far as there's a lot that I do not support. I would say that sitting down with North Korea is probably the only redeeming thing that I could say Donald Trump has done. But even then, that's not enough. He's mess that up. It was way too easy for him to not mess that up, and he kind of already has done so, because there is still a threat of nuclear war that we could potentially be in if it doesn't get resolved. So, yeah, even I would say I agree, but not completely.
Do you have any ideas of the way that he should have approached the North Korean negotiations that would have been better?
You know, I don't know personally because I'm not a U.S. diplomat, but I think Donald Trump, being the president of the United States, has that capacity to employ the knowledge of U.S. diplomats that are experienced in this. But as we know, that is not part of his repertoire. He goes in and speaks out of his mouth like it's out of his behind, and he's he messed up a really simple thing that could have been enormously great for relations between the United States and Korea, but it was an easy fluke that he did, and that doesn't surprise me at all. He's an incompetent president.
If you sat down tomorrow and had lunch with President Trump, what is a policy or something that you would ask him to do?
I don't know that there's so much that I would do. I mean, I would ask him first and foremost to reunite the children separated at the border that are thrown in cages, that are being infected with diseases like typhus and influenza, these very preventable diseases, and most of these illnesses were similar things that people died of when they were imprisoned in concentration camps during the Holocaust. So to not see the parallels there, I would of course it would go completely over his head because he's such a narcissist, but if I sat down with him, I would say, you need to stop family separation right now, and we need to stop this attack on our immigrant communities.
So specifically talking about the border crisis, what do you think so first of all, have you heard of the court ruling called the Flores Rule?
No, what is that?
So to my understanding, it's a rule that says if an immigrant family shows up at our border, we have three options. We can, 1, turn them away. 2, we can let them in and drop them off at a park. 3, we can bring them in, but we can vet them, we can make sure who they are. But in order to do that, we have to separate potential parents from potential children, because there are going to be people, especially human traffickers, that show up at the border and they say, oh, this is my child. Meanwhile, that child has been stolen. And the only way that we're going to be able to know who is telling the truth and who is lying is we bring them in, we separate them, and then we do a thorough investigation to make sure they are who they claim that they are before we allow them into the country.
Has this been implemented?
So, to my understanding, the Flores Rule is one of the legal limitations that is preventing Trump from pursuing the best pathway forward in terms of how do we best solve our crisis at the border. And that's why I was curious if you had heard of it or what your thoughts were on it.
I have not heard of that, but I know that through executive action, he can put an immediate end to this family separation crisis at the border. So as far as the Flores Rule, I don't think that's what's stopping him, in all honesty, because he doesn't have a regard for the Constitution or the rule of law. So the Flores Rule, I don't know the specifics of it, but it should be easier for him, with as executive order happy as he is, to prevent something like this from happening. But it's still going on. So that shows you the real agenda of this administration.
So you would ask him to use his executive powers to do the right thing at the border?
Yes. I mean, he wouldn't, but I guess if I asked, right?
Yeah.
Well, thank you for sharing your thoughts with us.
Thank you.